Hi, hi everyone. I'm Ryan Santschi. I own Interplay Design, which is a small design and web development company that specializes in WordPress. I also lead the WordPress meetup in town, and a couple years it's been now, but there was also a few WordPress conferences that I organized that were in town at Red River, where we had people come from all over the place to come speak. So I kind of live and breathe in the WordPress space every day, as well as work with clients every day and kind of experience their frustrations and so on with, publishing online and everything that kind of goes along with that. So and the name of my talk is to keep things simple and how to all those things basically start communicating with WordPress. Today, hopefully you'll have some familiarity at the end of this as far as like some of the terminology and things and wording to use, and why I say why that doesn't sound like the most like glorious thing, but after like kind of heading up some conferences and so on, often the best thing that one can get from experiencing a short talk about something is knowing how to Google things properly afterwards. And so that's why I'll focus a little bit on the wording and how that's kind of surrounds WordPress and creating your own website and so on, because it can really help, in terms of afterwards when you're like, how did that work, or what's that? And hopefully at the end of this, you'll have confidence of what to Google. Whether or not you know it completely, that would be impossible considering everything we're covering, but hopefully you just feel like you have a little bit more understanding about this whole process. So I will go on to the next slide. And it didn't work. Now it did. All right. And so this is really important. Why are you doing this? And so when you're creating a website, you want to have a really clear purpose. Sure, it goes without saying that having a website is kind of like the business card of our current era. It's kind of required. People will Google you and try to find out, is this a legit business? Do you have a website? Funny story about that, but I'll save that for later. But anyways, really need to have a very clear purpose of why you're doing that, because there's going to be a million different options. When you look into this whole thing of like whether you're looking for themes or you're looking to get a website made, there's going to be a million different people selling you a million different types of things. And the most important thing is knowing what it is you want your website to accomplish, and to keep it simple at the start so it's easy to kind of measure whether or not you're experiencing success. And so make sure you have a really clear purpose. Many sites fail because they try to do too much. Businesses do as well. You have to make sure you know exactly, it's not that it's not a moving target, but you really want to focus. If there's only one thing that your site was going to do, or this future website is going to do, what would it be? And be specific. You can't, something like grow my business or grow my brand or my name or so on, or whatever it is that you're searching for a platform for. It probably isn't specific enough. Maybe it's to really quickly, explain what it is you do and how to contact you, whatever that call to action is. And call to actions, it's often used in terms of like sales pitches and so on. But I mean, in these scenarios, sometimes a call to action is just like, you just want people to be familiar with your works. And so, you have those front and center on the front page. However, I mean, sometimes it's really easy to just get busy as creative people designing things and making things look good and so on. But we have to remember why it is that we're creating this thing, and then have the design kind of serve that. So yeah, some sites, it might just be having contact info. People Google you or look you up. Maybe the priority is just that, briefly state what it is that your business is, and having that contact information. A lot of businesses, will use templates and so on and put all this information in terms of their site. And 90% of the people that come to the site just want to be able to call or contact you. Don't hide that information if that's really why people are coming to the site. So yeah, I mean, I kind of explained, hold every attempt of design to whatever that purpose is. And don't assume anything. That's important in terms of, again, lots of sites I see where it's exactly what I was looking for. However, after going through pages and pages, I discover this business is in Chicago, not in Winnipeg. It's like, don't assume that everybody just knows who your brand is or knows where you are, or knows anything about you. You never want to assume that. And that's why you'll see, particularly a lot of marketing and design companies know this from being in the industry for a while, and you'll see front and center right away a sentence that just states what it is they are and what they do. And that's why you kind of learn the lesson. Before you have a big hero image that takes up the whole screen, just make sure that anybody who comes to your site right away understands what it is you're doing. And it's okay to sacrifice things looking pretty if it means communicating clearly. So yeah, that's kind of the end of that thought. And I'm trying to, just let me double check. Do I have any questions? I'm just.
No questions just yet.
No questions, okay.
Really good points. I think everyone's nodding their heads with you, even though you can't see us.
I can't, no. Thank you, nodding heads everywhere. I feel affirmed and not so alone in my self-isolation. Okay, jargon number 1, web development talk. Oh, wow, there's a whole bunch of chat items that just came up. Thank you, nods. All right. And again, some of you might be familiar with some of this, but I find there's a lot of kind of like jargon that gets really confusing. So I just want to kind of systematically go through it and explain what each thing is. Okay, hosting is like the computer that has access, or the server you'll hear that has access to the internet. So your site is on that, and it gives it access to the internet. And so you need to have hosting, otherwise your site won't be available to the internet. Examples of hosts are like Bluehost, GoDaddy. There's some smaller, more boutique ones. My company Interplay provides custom WordPress hosting where everything's kind of tuned to do that. And there's some other sites that, and even in hosting, there's some differences. So on one hand, you'll have hosting like Bluehost or GoDaddy, where a majority of it is everything's up to you. So they'll make it easy for you to maybe to create your first WordPress site, or somewhat easy. And then once you have it, well, you have to do your own WordPress updates, and you have to make sure that your site's always up, and you have to back up your own site. And if it ever does go down, they might be able to help you, but because if you're only on like a $10 a month plan or a $20 a month plan, it's not going to be a high priority. So it's still like, it's like somebody else is providing the host, but you're still having to do a lot of the hosting responsibilities. On the other hand, there's hosts that are like we call like managed hosts. And so, and these managed hosts, you're not necessarily going to have like a cPanel sort of thing, if you've even heard that term, which is kind of a dashboard of tools to access the server. But you're going to have a site where they're going to do the updates for you, and they're going to do backups, and they're going to kind of make sure that the performance of your site is okay. Those obviously are going to cost more, but yeah, you need hosting so that your site can be accessed through the internet. And so that's essentially what hosting is. DNS, which I think sometimes gets confused in hosting, but it's very different. So hosting by itself would work without even a domain name, and a domain name would be like, google.ca or yourbusinessname.com or whatever URLs are, kind of thing. Now, if you didn't have a DNS, there still are kind of ways to just go to websites, and they're called IP addresses, and they're like 132.147.323.16, or whatever. People are usually more familiar with the 192.182.100.1 through 10. But you might have seen that locally if you're ever getting tech support about your internet or something like that. Well, I got lost on IP addresses. It's not even on here. But anyways, domain names are essentially a human-friendly way so that you don't have to remember IP addresses. And particularly on shared hosts, all those sites are going to have the same like cheap hosting for around $10 a month and under, and that sort of thing. Even up to $20 a month is always going to have one IP address for multiple sites anyways. And so just typing in the IP address wouldn't work anyway in that circumstance. So you need a domain name, a human-friendly name that people can get to your site through, like whatever your business is .com, and that's that sort of URL. And so most hosts, particularly ones that target at the entry level, and where their business is really about having masses of people, they often will include domain name registrations at the sorry, I got distracted by my notification that I should be doing this meeting right now. But anyways, they'll often combine it. So you can go to like GoDaddy or Bluehost right now, and you can see that you can register domain names. Getting a domain name is important too, because if you ever want to have an email address at your business instead of at Gmail or so on, you need your own registered domain name. I personally would recommend hover.com. Now, it might not be as simple for some people because they just do domain names. They don't do hosting.
Hey, Ryan.
Yep.
Can you repeat that? Did you say hover.com?
Hover.com, yeah.
HOVER?
Yeah. Is everybody a panelist?
No, these are
I'm
just
gonna, oh, there it is, all panelists. There we go, sorry, I'll just.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. They do, but they're, in my life as somebody who's kind of a nerd and tries to learn about everything I'm into, whether it be like fancy mechanical keyboards where I took apart every one of these switches and changed the springs so that it could be exactly how I like, to other things that I'm into. With the combination of the big box stores, gone are the days when you could go into a store or talk to a business and I feel like they actually know more than I do. Hover does, and you can just call them and they answer your questions, and they're very knowledgeable. I do not need to see you. Everybody's camera is blocked right now, I think, Jenny. Sorry, I'm just responding to your question. Oh, you're missing. Currently got my camera blocked. You're missing my picture? I'm not sure what Monica is
Strange.
asking.
I think people can see, so I don't know. I'll talk to Monica privately.
Sure. But anyways, yeah. So the idea, just to briefly kind of explain how it works, is a domain name server or service takes that name you've registered, and it's just like a sign, and it points to wherever your server is. And so that's why when you get a domain name, you'll have to do domain name records that point to a server. Fortunately, you only have to do it once or whenever you change hosting, but that's another reason to keep your domain name at a place like Hover, because then you never have to change it. And you don't have to, like if you want to change your hosting from like, Bluehost to more of a boutique hosting solution, you don't have to, move your domain name at the same time. And keeping your domain name in the same place is nice, and never having to move it, because not only does it point, like I was saying before, to your site or your server, it also points to your email service. And so you never want your email to go down just because you're moving a domain name. So I think I've talked about TNS stuff though. Platform in this case is WordPress. There's lots of different ways to build sites. And this is the platform that's kind of like operating on the host server. WordPress is huge. It's over a third of the internet right now, which means like of the top like million sites or 100 million sites, I think both. Actually, I think the top million, it's a little higher, but of the top, maybe it's 10 million sites in the world. It's like 33% of those. So using it as a service means you're open up to a lot of different people that are knowledgeable about it. It's a very well supported project, and it's an open source project as well. But I might talk a little bit more of that in a bit. So that doesn't really need too much more clarification right now.
Guy,
SEO, yeah.
before you move on, sorry, there's just a question about whether if you recommend purchasing the .ca and the .com of a domain name.
I recently saw a report, a study that Canadians, if your business is going to stay focused in Canada, actually have more trust of .ca than even .com. The truth is, I don't think that many people, after going to your site once, memorize it anymore. And so, but if you want to get it, you know, if you're in a really competitive space or whatever, yeah, I would say .ca is greater than .com if you're focusing in Canada, and .com is still amazing. It would still be on the top of the list for any international company. This I've only read so many studies on, so but my personal preference that I've learned is it's better to be memorable than accurate. You know, you see things like Yahoo and Kijiji and WhatsApp and like all these different things that are very easy to kind of memorize. And even though it might not be the most descriptive words, at least if people hear about it once, they remember it. And if they remember it, then they just have to start typing it in their browser, and your browser, as long as you've gone to it once, will auto type the rest. But yeah, no, that's a really good question. And you know, you could probably learn more than I know about that right now. If you Google both, yeah, like what's the best domain suffix and what's the best method for choosing a domain name. I will explain WordPress, the WordPress.org thing in a bit. That's coming up. That's Jargon Part 2. You're getting ahead. But all right, let me, sorry, I have that. Sorry, I skipped over these other things. But yeah, let me go through this stuff again. We can't, any one of these topics could be like a whole discussion. And because of most of the discussion I want to spend on WordPress, I'll try to go through this a little bit quicker. SEO, search engine optimization, that's how easy, when people are searching for things that you want your website to come up for, the process of getting your website to come up for on those search engines for those phrases is called search engine optimization. And those can be called keywords. Those can be called, there's so many. The SEO industry kind of bugs me a little bit because I think people get so hung up on it sometimes when they're just starting a site, and it's such, there's all these people like, you know, always advertising for X a dollar a month, we'll get you #1 in Google and so on. And there's also, the reason why you have to be careful is there's still some companies that do things in a unethical sense or black hat sort of sense. And what I mean by that is they try to game the system. And so the most obvious example, I mean, this is going back maybe like 15 years now, but like Google's, one of the reasons why Google became so big is they created a better algorithm to rate sites. And so what they did is they checked to see how many other sites are linking to your site or your company's site, and which was a really smart way to see whether a site should be ranked higher. And so as soon as people found this out, they just would create tons and tons of backlinks. Like they just go into forums about sewing and do backlinks to, you know, a computer store, and their, you know, in their name or anything like that. Like all over the internet, they would just create. So these companies, like SEO companies, would just like create tons and tons of backlinks. And eventually Google was just like, nah, we figured what you guys are doing. And the penalization destroyed businesses overnight that were dependent on being seen online and being found near the top. And so, yeah, SEO, here's the guideline I give you for where you're at now when you're kind of starting your first or second site, or even until you're really in a competitive space where you're competing with, you know, lots of other companies to come up number one, you know, where that's really important, essential to your business. Until you're there and dealing with those problems, create content that humans want to read. The whole algorithms that Google has and other search engines, like DuckDuckGo and so on, like their whole thing is they want to try to figure out what humans are looking for. And so if you err on the side of just making things that are good for humans, that humans want to read, you're going to get you're going to do way better. And so that's what I do. That's what you should do, is try to create content that people want to read, that is interesting to them, that's shareable, or is providing them exactly what they're looking for. And you will be rewarded for that. Creating new content on a regular basis is a good idea, as well as, you know, you might have heard this before you've ever looked into it, but having titles and links that have some of those keywords in it. And so that's why even on sites I make for clients in town, you know, you'll see like Winnipeg maybe used a little bit more than you normally would if they're a Winnipeg-based business that is targeting the Winnipeg market. But yeah, not an SEO talk, so I'll leave that. But hopefully you kind of have an idea of what SEO is now. Analytics, Google Analytics is often the most common thing. This is a way that you can see how many people are coming to your site, when they're coming, what what their interests are, depending on what analytics if you're doing Facebook advertising, you can find out tons of things. You can find out if what subsection of the people coming to your site are into knitting. It's disturbing. I'll start off saying, but some of the analytics are really good and actionable. They teach you when people are coming to your site. You can, you know, this would be more like probably not first steps, but just adding Google Analytics would be the first steps. But you can, you know, further down the line, you know, you can do experiments where if you move a button from here to here on your front page, you can look to see if that converts better. And so there's a lot of different things. Again, the whole metrics, analytics, research-based design industry that you see, I question it a lot, because a lot of the times people in companies are selling you a service and they're creating a metric that they can easily achieve well on. Maybe it's even visitors to your site. If your sole goal was just to get more people to your site, that's not a hard thing to inflate, but not necessarily in a good way, because you can get tons of people coming to your site, maybe because of clickbait titles and so on. But if they come to your site and they're just like disappointed, they're just going to be angry at your brand. They're not going to, you know, you're not going to develop trust or anything, which is typically what you're looking to do. So analytics and metrics, you know, it's not the biggest concern when you're first starting out, but it's good to have them in place and have Google Analytics set up, just so that as you grow, you can look at that data and have an idea whether or not you're achieving that one thing you're working towards. FTP I won't talk too much about, but like that's file transfer protocol, or you'll see SFTP, which is secure file transfer protocol. This is often a way that you can, if you were on, this was more of a thing back in the day, not just a few years ago, when you would go to a host and they wouldn't have like a one-click install for WordPress. You'd have to like download it from wordpress.org, then upload it, and you could do that through like their dashboard, the host, or you could do it through something called FTP. And you need a program for FTP, and it's just a way of communicating at a file level with a host, with a server. And hopefully it's not something you ever have to do, but if you hear that word, I just want you to kind of be familiar with what it is. User, really quickly, there's a lot of users, and so try to keep notes of what users what. And I should add something to this, some other advice, but so for one instance, you're going to have a user with your host. Well, that's one user. So if you're working with a web developer or a designer or a company or whatever, that's your like web hosting account user. Your website user, your WordPress user will be a different user. And you might have a different user for FTP if you happen to have had to use that for some reason. And if you use a separate company for DNS, that'll be a separate user. So typically you're probably going to have 3 users, your DNS one, your logging into your host one, and then your WordPress site user. But they're different and kind of, and this is where I was going to say I should have added this. Please, everybody in this day and age, use a password manager. Sorry, like LastPass. I'll share the link, or 1Password. I know you're not seeing my slide right now. I'll go back, but this way you don't have to use the same password for every single thing you do, which is so insecure. These programs, basically, you just have to remember 1Password, which is your login to those programs, and they will keep track of all your other passwords. And sorry, just to give you an example of what that does, like let's say I go to a random client site that I haven't been to for a long time. I'm not thinking of anybody right now that I haven't been to for a long time, but like, I go to Kaval, which is a client, and you can see how my username and password just auto put in here. And LastPass does this for me. And that way I can have ridiculously long passwords that are 32 digits long that I will never remember. And I don't have to worry about it. So please, if you take one thing from this WordPress talk, use a password manager. It will save your life at some point. Maybe not your life, but sanity. Okay. Hey, we're starting to begin. This is good. So getting to the login screen. So I've talked a little bit about this already. This is just referring to Jenny asked if I have a format for passwords that ensures something different but easy to replicate for each site, is that still too risky? The problem is typically things that are memorable aren't that hard to break with a computer nowadays. Like even like I think a 12-digit password, and when I say digit I mean like letters, symbols, and everything else. I think it only takes a couple days of a processor like I would have on my MacBook to break that. And if you really want to have a system, then use passphrases. And passphrases are actual sentences with spaces in it. And those are significantly more difficult for kind of cracking software to actually go through. So an example would be, and again, instead of like 132xky3, instead of just a total random string of letters and symbols and words, you for something random you can look around your room, but I'll type one like. Just like something that you can say that has some sort of, makes sense in a way. That's going to be infinitely more easy to remember than a bunch of random strings, particularly when you need them to be 12 to 16 digits long. And it's actually harder to crack too, because the spaces add a certain level of randomness to it that makes it much more challenging to break. So their whole job is just security. So whereas like um, you would think other systems would have really secure things like banks. Banks are the worst. There are so many banks that often have a password that has to be between 8 digits and 12 digits, and it's just like way to really shorten the time of any sort of software having to go through a certain amount of possibilities to figure out your password. Um, yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess there's two things you can do, Kelly. If there's a really, let's say there's a password that's really needs to be secure, you can also have it encrypted so that once you log into the password management software, you also have to manually put in the password again, and the encryption against it is different. So um, if somebody hacks into a system, typically they don't actually know your password right away unless you've used a really simple password. And they did it that way, where they ran a lot like library and common passwords against the database. Typically, they have a hash of your password. So they have the ability to kind of like replicate your password to get in, but they don't necessarily know what that is. When you encrypt the password within the software, it uses a different hash. So somehow, even if they got into your password, those other passwords that you might need to be even more secure wouldn't be foundable. They wouldn't be able to see them right away. And so I get that hypothetical, but the hypothetical of just having insecure passwords for all your passwords or more insecure passwords, I think is a greater risk. The other thing is a lot of those programs, particularly with a lot of the different passwords, even have a thing that can like fairly easily change passwords as well. So if there was a hack, they could like run something, or you could run something pretty easily that would just change all your passwords pretty quick. But yeah, that would be a risk. I'm just weighing that risk as not being as great as just using simple passwords. Or I mean, no matter what, I'm going to run out of memory with all the different passwords I have to memorize. So I mean, pen and paper would be the most secure thing if you want to do that. I just run out of patience for it. But where to begin? Getting to the login screen for WordPress is what I'm referring to. Many hosts like GlueDaddy and GoDaddy and Bluehost and GoDaddy, and a few other, there's lots of different hosts out there. Make it easier than it used to be to just install WordPress. Like they'll have a thing where you just click and they'll create a WordPress user even for you. And sorry, I'm seeing the question. Yeah, I'll come back to that, Patrick. That's a great comment. Now I forgot where I was. Oh yeah, they'll create a WordPress user for you to make it a little easier to get started with WordPress. I mean, if you get a site custom made by somebody, or like Interplay, my company, or that's all can be taken care of for you. But at the same time, there's lots of different solutions out there to kind of get you started. This itself could be a whole 2-hour session where more of a tutorial where we walk through going through a certain host or a certain solution of how to get started. I mean, whatever company you go with, whether it's Interplay, whether it's Bluehost, whether it's GoDaddy, the onus is on those companies to make it easier for you. Yeah, again, it's a sort of a tutorial that's out there as well. So again, as far as giving you what to Google, that's what you can Google. You can Google how to get a WordPress site on Bluehost, and there would be a lot of Bluehost results that would help you, and go from there if you want to totally DIY it. Oh yeah, this is, you could talk about what, yeah, we could talk about this for a while. That was kind of my last point. So in a way, this is like one of the most important things to get started, and we're kind of skipping it, but there's just no way of doing it unless we kind of had a tutorial where we all had screens and we're doing this together. And I first want to kind of just show you about WordPress. And again, I think as much as we could spend time on this, there's some really great resources online that kind of show you how to do this. So this brings us over to jargon number 2. The more I think about it, the more I'm not necessarily going to answer Patrick's question in the future, so I don't mind answering it. The question was, I'd love to have my email and phone number on the site, but worried about trashy ad companies, hackers, etc. Suggestions on protecting against that. Yeah, you can use form software. Like you can use not software, like a form plugin to where people fill that out a form, and then it notifies you whether it types a message or it emails you a message. However, email is notorious for ending up in spam filters, and sometimes the spam filters that are before even getting to your spam folder. So I always advise using a form plugin, excuse me, that both emails or notifies you, as well as it saves it to the database, so that, you know, if you notice a few days not getting any contact information, you can log into your WordPress site and see, you know, whether or not anything was submitted. And so, yeah, I can give you a few examples of plugins to do that. Here's a, I'll come back to this because I can't, I'm forgetting one name really briefly just while I'm talking. So hopefully that helps though. Yeah, sometimes you don't want to just put the phone number. I can show you kind of an alternative to that, but there's still a chance that bots or whatever will scrape your phone number. That might be the time, if that ends up being a large problem for you, you can always kind of go with like digital phone service numbers that you can easily change the number. Meanwhile, once you have existing clients, you can give them the real number, but you can have a different kind of like fake number that redirects yours, where if you end up having problems, you can switch it out. Like, those aren't too expensive. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the WordPress jargon and the most confusing one. And I mean, I was just answering an email to somebody, a design company in town that my company is going to work with, and they were confused about this, and I had to explain this just like a few minutes ago. So it is a confusing thing. There is WordPress, which is the open source project that it's open source. I've contributed to it. Lots of different coders and so on are constantly contributing to it to make it what it is. And it's this collective thing where there's people all over the world that are contributing bugs, they're contributing new translations, so it's in multiple languages. They're contributing lots and lots of, you know, whether it be code, whether it be accessibility issues, whether it be like accessibility as far as people who are using screen readers, accessibility as far as other assistant technologies. And there's all these people that are constantly working on it to make it better, and that's what makes this open source project. And it's incredible. And part of the reason why I was drawn to WordPress as a developer is that there's this generosity within the community, because everybody who's kind of learned about it is because somebody else has rather directly spent time helping them learn about it, or they spent time literally building it so that you could use it. And so it is really like one of those standing on the shoulder of giants kind of situation to you know, be able to utilize this open source project. Now, the open source project WordPress, which is all I've really been talking about today whenever I've referred to it, is at wordpress.org. And so you'll often see this thing of wordpress.org versus wordpress.com. So what's the distinction between those two things? WordPress.com isn't the open source project at all. It's actually a service that's provided by Automatic. And Automatic is a company, a private company. How is it that they use this word, WordPress, which just confuses people, in one of their products? It is because Automatic, with 3 T's, because it's Automatic, Matt with 2 T's, Mullenweg, is the creator of WordPress, or one of the co-founders of WordPress. And so he has the right to that copyright and can use it as a product within his company, Automatic, to provide the service, which is WordPress.com. And so that is the distinction. So WordPress.com has a little bit of a different dashboard because they've created it as a platform to allow people to publish. They even have the capacity to export your site. So they don't, it's not, you're not necessarily locked in, but while you're there, you have some limited capabilities. And their target market largely has been people just trying to publish, not necessarily businesses. Or if you get to the business level, it's a huge jump from over here, you know, 10, 15, 20, $30 an hour, a month, I mean, sorry, all the way to WordPress VIP, where they're like doing custom service stuff for you, like the New York Times, New York Times would use that. And that's, you know, that's like $5,000 a month. So in between those two things, there's not too many options, and it doesn't necessarily reflect the flexibility of WordPress, but it is nice because it gives you something that just works, and their customer results support's pretty good, and so on. But typically what we're talking about here is WordPress.org. Now, Automatic does contribute to the WordPress.org project, and has some, you know, plugins that are really well known, like Jetpack, like WooCommerce, which is like WooCommerce, which is a plugin to allow you to do e-commerce on your WordPress site. More people are using that way more than are using even Shopify, like way, way, way more, like just as far as WordPress market share and capabilities and so on. So that's one of the benefits of using WordPress, is that because it's open source, any programmer or coder can come in, look at the source, and there's a whole means of extending WordPress called the plugins ecosystem, or extending the way it looks, which is the theme ecosystem. And pretty much any solution you can imagine has been created within WordPress. Maybe not that you can imagine, but every common use for website. Like if you want to have your own social media platform that looks and interacts like Facebook, but isn't Facebook for your company, there's a plugin that does that, and it's amazing. If you need an e-commerce store that you want connected with Stripe or Square for your payment gateway, there's plugins for that. You need forms, there's plugins for that. And so there's many, many different options within WordPress. But sticking with the jargon, that's the difference between WordPress.org and .com, the open source project, versus a product by Automatic. So the admin is synonymous with like the dashboard. When people say the admin, they mean like you log in and you see the admin. To give you an idea of the login screen, I can show you one right here. I was just in one here, sorry. This is kind of how the login screen looks when you saw the login screen before, didn't you? Maybe you didn't. Let me make this a little smaller, and then you guys can see it all. So this would be like the login screen, which is you go to your URL and then you do wp-login.php, or if you don't want to remember all that, you can just do login and it will redirect. And then you log in with your username and password. And this whole area where you kind of see this black bar at the top, you see all this stuff on the side. And I have certain plugins over here that I'm familiar with that are installed, or ones that I've created. This looks a little intimidating, and I get that. But I just want to, again, just kind of introduce you to this area. This is the admin, this whole area, or people will call it the dashboard. And this is where your plugins are. This is where you can create pages and posts. And between your posts and your pages and your plugins, those are like the three things you're going to be going to at first initially. Oh yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I'll pull that back up. Actually, I will pull up a different site. Here, let me do a test one so that I don't change things on a live site. Oh, that's because it's local. My login thing didn't work. There we go. Because this is local, it'll go a little bit slower. So here's posts, here's pages, here's your plugins, and these need to be updated, but I won't do it right now because it's doing it locally and it'll take a little bit longer. And so posts and pages are very similar, but posts are typically things that where how new it is matters. Like even if you go to all posts, which there's none on this site, so it's not a great example, but you'll see that, not seeing it in this example, but these would be ordered from newest to oldest. Whereas if you go to pages, you'll see that it's ordered alphabetically. And so that really is the fundamental difference. Pages are more static content that's kind of, you know, always going to be around. You might update your contact page, you might update your about page, but you're not creating new pages every week. If you're creating something new every week, that's where you'd be creating posts. And so you'll hear posts and pages very often when people are talking about WordPress. That's what that means. And then what you also might hear a little bit, and I didn't even write this down, but WordPress has a new editor that came out about a year ago. And it's called, when it was in its development stage, and even the development side of it, not the part that's part of WordPress right now, it's called Gutenberg. And Gutenberg is like the new WordPress editor. And what it does is, whereas before, and here's a site that hasn't been updated to give you kind of a distinction between the two. Let's just even go to like a page like this. Of course, I went to the one that goes to somewhere else. Even a page like this. So if you go edit page here, you'll see, you know, some of this content's here, and then a lot of the content that shows up on the front page is put there through almost like a form, which are called custom fields. And the featured image is at the top, it's over here. And your editor is kind of like Word in a way, with even less power. You know, you can do bold, you can do italic, you can do some bulleted lists, you can change things to headings or their alignment. But at the end of the day, because of the limitation of this WordPress editor, to make more custom things, like where you wanted to add like information that wasn't just a text block, you have to do custom fields and create custom field plugins and things like that you'd have to use to basically create a page that looks like this. Because you weren't able to do big background image and that sort of thing. And so the benefit of the new editor, which here you'll see this front page, and what you'll notice is when you log into this, and this isn't on my development, so there might be a few things different, but you'll see by and large, it looks the part that's the actual page content, not the header and footer, looks almost identical. And so this is a night and day difference from how the editor used to be. And if you want to create new things, these are called blocks. So you can see how it even said blocks. And blocks are different types of content. And these are the most used ones. These aren't the only ones. You can see there's actually quite a few options. And so you can do something like create a group, which is just kind of a generic word for background. I'm realizing there was already something here, so I'm not going to giving a great example here. Here, let me go to the bottom. So I'm going to do a group. I'm going to make it full width, which in this theme means almost full width. You know, I'm going to change, let's do something drastic and change the background. Oh, that's the text color. That's not drastic. Change the background to something dark. And then I want to have, let's say, a 2-column layout. So I'm going to look for columns. I'm going to pick 2 columns. And then I want to just put a paragraph. And so And of course, I don't have the color on light, so I'll change it to white. Anyways, and then you can preview this. And if you, sorry, that change I did before did that. You can see down below, sorry, I have it so low. Not the greatest example, sorry, it doesn't look that impressive, but sure enough, the hello, exactly how it shows up in the back end is there. And that's how all these components were made. And you can even see, you can make the background, not move there to kind of give a cool effect. But anyways, I'm going to undo my changes because I made a mistake before. But that's blocks at work. And so there's lots of different blocks. Some other blocks is the cover block, which is the one I was kind of describing before, where you can pick an image. And then you can put, yep.
We've got 5 minutes to 4.
Wow.
We can still go. We can go later if.
I know. I will. I feel bad for anybody who ever has to schedule anything. I know not your lives don't revolve around this. I apologize. So that's the new editor, and so I just kind of gave you an example with blocks. It was very brief, briefer than I'd like, but I did cover that. What I'll do really quickly is going back to like all the different things WordPress can do. I mentioned that before. This is why I want to keep things simple and remember what's the one thing you really want your site to do. When you're checking and you're looking for added functionality and you're looking at plugins, please use plugins that have been updated recently and who developers, you can tell, care and they've been around for a while. So look for reputation, look for unpaid for reviews and so on. Oh yeah, I thought the time was 3 to 5 too. Sorry, we only have 5 minutes.
We have until 5. It's the webinar is an hour, and then we have time for questions after. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Well, I tried to answer some of the questions as we go. So
yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, it's all good.
Yeah. All right. I'll try to be done maybe then. I honestly don't think it's tons more actually after that. But I mean, if you guys wanted to see a little bit more demo of, how you can create things with blocks, I could do that. You can see that shows up there. Basically, the editor now looks like how it looks in the front end. And that's really what the difference is at this point. I remember a client who was using WordPress, kind of the old version, the old editor, which I showed at the Above All installation sites, where it's more like a form and so on. She had a good functional site and so on that used this kind of field. And when she had experienced the new editor, like literally tears of joy. Like it was a night and day experience because it gives you that much more power. It's not like some of the page builders either, where you have like a whole nother UI over here that you have to use, that you're then adding things. Yeah, Heather, I can answer that. I can try to answer that, and I'll explain what I mean by that. The part where I'm uncertain is that if your site was using a page builder like Elementor, like Beaver Builder, like Visual Composer, it's not easy. And that's why one of the many reasons I've always liked to cry and encourage people, don't use page builders. Particularly when I knew WordPress core was going to solve that problem anyways, like the new editor does. And they're very quick instead of making your site slower, and they still give you that what you see, what you get, even layout kind of editor. Now, if you have an old site to the new editor, how would you do that? One way you could do it is just change themes. So you could change themes to one that supports the new editor. You can check them out with the core themes. And so, and so to change themes, you're not seeing my whole screen here, but I just clicked on customize, and then you can change your theme. And here's the default WordPress theme, which it's not going to let me change to until I update it, I think. But you can just click on this live preview. I don't know if you saw what I did down below. And here you can see how it would look if you change themes. So Heather, if you have a WordPress site with an old theme, or a theme that's not supporting the new editor, and you just want to see like how much is it going to mess it up to change themes, again, you can just preview a theme and how it looks. And if you're like, this is 90% of the way there, and I would say this, if I want to change to this theme with this client for some reason, this doesn't totally break the site, just changing these themes right now. But at the end of the day, if I'm like, that doesn't work, or maybe I want to try this theme and give a live preview, oh, that's definitely not what I want. Or maybe it is. You can see some things just aren't really working correctly. You just go back and again, you haven't activated any of those other themes. So nothing's changed at a database level. And so you can just exit out of there and not save it, and everything's back to how it was. Yeah, unfortunately, if your site was built using a page builder, and unfortunately lots of companies even in Winnipeg still build sites that way and charge you the same as just getting a custom theme developed properly, it's a headache to try to convert it over to the normal editor. You're pretty much having to like recreate and copy and paste all the content over. Yeah, you always want to make sure your plugins will transfer, but if a plugin's working properly, unless it's a plugin that a developer made specifically for the theme you are using. Sorry, I should take a step back. I'm remembering all the crazy things that are out there. There are some plugins that are made just to work with certain themes. And it's the way that some companies kind of try to tie you in to their ecosystem. So you would have to be careful, but yeah. Again, if you just preview the live theme, Deborah, you can see kind of whatever that plugin functionality was, if it's still there as you're previewing it, it might work, but that becomes a little bit harder. That's why it's nice, if you're comfortable with it, creating a duplication of your site, and then trying those things, and if they fail, you're okay. That's what developers do, but all the time. But if you don't have the resources to pay a developer, trying to create a duplicate of the site is the safest thing you can do. The second safest thing you can do, which is almost as safe, is completely back up your site, try it, and if it doesn't work, restore that backup. Backup plugins that I use often is Updraft. Let me see. Sometimes I get the name of it wrong. Yeah, Updraft to backup plugin. And what's nice about it, when you back up your site, often it'll just back it up to your host, and then your amount of files will get too big, and your host will be mad, and they'll turn down your site. But with Updraft, you can back up to like Dropbox or kind of like cloud solutions like that, and that way it's not taking up room on your server. Plus, if your server goes down, your backup was on your server, so you always want to have offsite backups. Anyways, and that's very important. That's advice in and of itself. Always have a means of backups, because things can go wrong. Is there a plugin? Jenny asks, is there a plugin asking to be updated? Do we simply click update? Yes. This is where the backups come out important too. There's always a chance that an update can mess things up. And that's why, I think a lot of plugins will say, please back up your site before doing this. Or some plugins will take even a more responsible approach where typically there's like 3 different types of updates. There's a major version, which is the first number. There's like a major update, which is the second number. Or there's like a small fix, which is the third number. And if it's one of those like small fixes, you probably don't have to back up your site in order to do those updates. That might be a security issue or that sort of thing. But if it's a bigger update, like, and I remember WooCommerce did this, where they'd be like, please back up your site. This is a big update that could change some things if you're doing things the way we did 8 years ago, kind of thing. But yeah, backing up your site has to be a part of like a responsible having a website process, or it won't take long until you regret it. And that's where some of the managed hosting comes in play. That can be really useful and really helpful, where you're like, I just don't have to worry about my, like, it depends on, managed hosting is even used pretty liberally, but I know like with managed hosting that we provide, I mean, you don't have to worry about your domain names settings. You just give us access, we do all that for you. You know, take care of the hosting, take care of the backups, take care of the optimization, which is one of the ways Google ranks you, is how fast your site performs. And so, again, you're going to pay a little bit more monthly, but it ends up being something, depending on how much time you have, it's going to be worth it pretty quickly. So, yeah, keep the questions coming. I already talked a lot about this slide, I think. Don't use slideshows. That's the other big piece of advice I'll give you. They slow down your site, they're not as accessible, and Google won't index a lot of the slides that aren't showing, and human beings don't use them. I can send you a bunch of studies, and it's really fun to watch.
Are you talking about like a flip book or something like that? Or
I will, like any automatic moving thing.
oh, carousel.
They're called slideshows. Yeah. And if you guys want to see it, you can see the URL right now. But I mean, this just takes 10 seconds. And of course, it also illustrates the irritatingness of slideshows. You'll start reading that, and if you read too slow, it'll just automatically go to the next. I had my mouse over it, so it didn't go to the next one. But anyways, and I've read more recent studies than a lot of these are, and just like, people ignore anything that automatically moves. Some of the studies too are like explained in detail, and it's actually worse than they kind of explain here. It just goes on forever. We've gone through the cycle. Here. Yes, that is an awesome one to show clients. There's still sometimes, but yeah, I mean, this is again, like, so many, I know my responsibility as a developer and designer is to educate people and sometimes say no. There's been a couple times people really insisted on a carousel no matter what. And so I gave them a tax. I charged them. I said, I am no longer able to show this as a portfolio piece. So there will be an extra invoice of shame, a shame tax. But anyways, don't use slideshows. I'm going to stop that because it's going to drive me insane. Anyways, and one thing I hear sometimes is that a lot of plugins is a bad thing. It isn't. Getting plugins that do one thing and do one thing really well is good, and it also means if you're continually doing that, having a bunch of different plugins is okay. The danger is when you have a bunch of different plugins that are doing the same thing, you know, it can create problems. So yeah, slideshow is definitely bad for anybody using assistive technology. And again, they just don't perform well for anybody. They're usually the difference. It's usually comes from like some executive's office or whatever. People are like, all these things are important, so they have to show in this amount of space. But the truth is, particularly with touchscreens being represented on all different sizes of screens and phones and everything, everybody scrolls, like, and it's not a burden the way it used to be. There used to be the whole like above the fold thing, or whatever that first visual of your site is just so important. And I wouldn't like ignore that priority, but don't just put a big image there without explaining anything. And again, going back to the keep things simple at the start, carousels are the epitome of not doing that. They're the epitome of being indecisive and trying to do too many things. But I thought there was a new question, wasn't there? Oh, I have to scroll down. Oh, open. I'm not on the open tab, sorry. Here we go. If we have a design team making a website, what main things should we have or ask from them? Or what should they provide? Now, sorry, can you clarify, are they making a website or are they making a website to be developed? Like, are they designing one in using Adobe software and then somebody will be developing it? Or when you say design, you mean like building it? Yes, building. If you're having a design team making a website, I should do a checklist for this someday, maybe tomorrow. But you should make sure if you're paying them to actually develop a website, you're not paying them hundreds of dollars, but you're actually paying like thousands. And I don't mean tens of thousands, I mean just even a few thousand. They shouldn't be just using a page builder. Page builders are a whole program that sits on top of WordPress Editor, and it slows everything down. They're more irritating to use. There's less support instructing you how to use them. Again, WordPress is huge. Why wouldn't you use the editor that's going to be the best supported and is always going to be like not have issues in terms of the future? And it's more likely to be a generalized skill that even current or future employees will have because of the success of WordPress. Why would you take another editor like a page builder, put it on top of that just to do things that WordPress always does? I would ask if they're using a page builder. A lot of companies are still using things like Elementor and Visual Composer and Beaver Builder, and they're a nightmare because they remove a lot of the, I already started explaining it. One of the other things that are poor about them is they remove a lot of the benefit of WordPress open source world. So they're basically not going to be as interoperable with the whole host of plugins and functionality that WordPress provides because they're built on top of WordPress. And so again, that's a really big thing. The other thing you want to ask from them is you want to make sure that you pay somebody to build a website, and you have to make sure that if you need them to, part of their price and that quote is actually to make your site go live and it actually be optimized. In terms of SEO and being found, a site needs to be performant and run well. And there's lots of sites out there that don't because they were made poorly, or they've got 90% of the way there, and then that last 10% where they just made sure the proper things are cached and the certain scripts are combined that need to be, or whatnot, or that it's even running wasn't done. And so you paid for this, they did 90% of the work, and they didn't just spend that a couple extra hours to make sure that your site performs well. And so I would make sure they're actually bringing your site live. They're not just building a site and then saying, hey, okay, put this somewhere. What are some of the other things? That's a really good question. I mean, hopefully this goes without saying, but you want it to be responsive. You want it to be mobile first. You want the site to load quickest when it's on the slowest internet connection, is essentially what that means. So if somebody's anywhere other than downtown Winnipeg and Manitoba, they're lucky to have 3G. Your site better not be 20 megabytes downloading it. The images better be loading quickly, and smaller versions of the image better be loading on smaller screens. And again, that's part of the thing that like managed hosting will take care of for you. And it just seems really uncommon, I find, for a lot of the shops in town to take care of that. So you have to be careful of that. You also want to double check that any licenses that are involved to make your site run, whether it be plugin licenses or the theme license, which again, I'm hoping they're not just using a purchase theme and they actually built you one for your client, for your brand and for your company to solve the problems that you identified. But in case they didn't and they just paid for a theme, there's going to be an annual licensing that if they haven't provided you the licensing code, that all of a sudden updates won't happen anymore. And when you lose those updates, there might be a security issue or things like that, and you need to update and you won't be able to, and you have to get a code from them, and sometimes they don't exist anymore. So yeah, that could be a whole other talk. What should you have and what should you ask from a team that's making a website for you? The other thing, and maybe the most important, is make sure that you understand and feel confident of how to use the site. So they didn't just make you a nice WordPress site, but they actually showed you how to interact and build with it. And along with that, something that we always do is the last invoice that I give for any website project, if it's not like a retainer or something like that, is 1 month after it's gone live. Because there's always things that you miss, no matter what, when you go live with something. There's always going to be something once it goes live, and those people you were just planning on interacting with the site are now actually interacting with the site, or those users that you thought you had trained or actually use the site. There's always going to be these questions, or maybe even little things that you need to fix as a developer. A lot of companies build sites and then like get their last paycheck, and then it's like, see you later. I would look for people in companies that actually are going to give you the invoice after it goes live for the final payment. Yeah, I can keep on talking, but maybe there's other. Oh, there's a new question. Yay. E-commerce. Yeah, woo something. Here, let me just double check. Yeah, so you can see here as far as the size of WooCommerce, which is one of the reasons why I'd recommend them so quickly, which is they have a 28% market share of the e-commerce platform's market share, and they're just one plugin of WordPress. That's not even just WordPress's, because there's other actually big plugins in the e-commerce space, like Easy Digital Downloads, that I'd also recommend, particularly if you're selling just digital goods like files or books or that sort of thing, or classes or meetings. Yeah, but anyways, you can see like right here, WooCommerce is bigger, has more market share than Shopify and Squarespace combined. Deborah asks, on WordPress site and specifically with my WooCommerce, I can add products 2 ways, through the admin and also a much more simple way. Is one better than the other? What is the more simple way, just so that I'm understanding correctly? One thing I find, and I don't know if this is answering your question, Deborah, but I find people, when they first come to the admin, they find it quite, if I can find it, they find it quite intimidating. And instead of going new post pages, one thing, let's say you want to edit a page or that sort of thing, I actually encourage people to just like view the front end of the site. And when they come upon a page they want to change or they want to learn how it was made, just click edit page, and then you avoid that whole admin thing. But Deborah, can you explain what your simpler way is, just so that I understand? I mean, I wouldn't say one's, whatever's simpler for you, I would say is better if they both have the same result.
Hey, Ryan.
Hi.
Hey. So are you just answering questions now? Are we in the question period?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Deborah had asked a question. I was just hoping to see.
I can actually unmute Deborah if you want to talk.
Sure.
You can unmute people for this portion. Deborah?
Hi, Deborah.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I was having a hard time getting back to the page where I can get into my conversation with you. But
Oh, sure.
so when I'm looking at my WooCommerce, or let's say I look at my shop online, if I just click on I'm just gonna open it here. If I don't go into the, if I just click on the shop in like on that top line there where I can go into my shop and
Yeah.
go edit, like it's right off of that page as opposed to going into the admin. So I guess it's with the plugin that I have.
Well, like just looking at my screen right now, like, do you mean like going new product?
Yeah, like to add a new product, that's where I notice it all the time is if I go to
Yeah.
add a product, then it's really simple on the interface that's if I'm not in the admin.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's what, yeah, that's what I was just kind of saying before. You can do a lot of things from the front end using that top black bar. You can create new products, post pages, and particularly for editing things, I just find it way more intuitive to just go.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's way more intuitive.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, that's a better way to do it. And there's not, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're just getting to the link a different way. So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, whatever's easier, do that for sure.
Yeah, but I do notice that there are some things that I can't do that I have to go into the admin. So sometimes I have to do a combination, but I guess I get to see more what it looks like when I'm doing it the simpler way. And then, but I might need to add like the shipping and that kind of stuff in
Right.
like in the admin area.
Yeah, well, when you go new product, it does take you to an admin page. Like,
Right. Yeah. It's a simpler form, I guess.
is it hiding the black bar on the left when you do it?
You know what? I'm just trying to get back there now. I feel like, sorry.
No problem.
Okay. So so the simpler one is if I click on my site in the top left for WordPress and then go down to where it says where it says store, and then I get a new dashboard. And if I click on products and then I go to add a product, then it's got like all the squares so I can see how it's going to be laid out. And yes, you're right, it does have a place for price and the dimensions and weight and quantity.
I'm not sure if you're using a slightly different plugin or not. So you can see my screen right now, right?
No, I can't.
Oh, sorry.
That's what I'm trying to get back into. Like obviously I'm hearing you, but
Yeah, yeah. I'm just showing another client's site, like in terms of if your screen looks like this, then that's just the normal admin one, even though I'm getting it to it from the front end. But you might have an extension or a plugin that's giving you maybe even more of a what you see is what you get sort of experience with WooCommerce in particular. Because WooCommerce by default still has you editing products kind of the way the old editor was. It's not like the full like kind of Gutenberg experience yet, though they do have that in beta. So that you might be have enabled something, because I remember they asked you to if you wanted to recently. I'm trying to remember, but yeah.
Yeah, so when I go into the admin, then to add a product is like it's not the blocks or anything. It's like that first screen that you showed us where it's linear and
yeah. No, that's what I'm looking at right now. Yeah.
So anyways, I guess I was just wondering if one was preferable over the other to
if it's working for you and it's easier, definitely do that option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no, happy to help.
You want to answer Nilofer? I'll unmute Nilofer.
If we need to show video, is it sufficient to use a media player like Vimeo? For video, you always want to use a service. Like even some of the biggest news sites in the world still use like YouTube to show videos or Vimeo. I would always use a service for showing video. You never want to take on that responsibility on your server to be streaming video, because it's a whole different experience. There can be some kind of gray areas where it's like, if let's say the video was just for people who had paid for a class, like there's just a limited amount of people who'd be viewing it, and it's like an instructional video that's kind of closed off from the public. Yeah, you could host it. You could host it on the site and still stream it, and that way it's like private and it's not public. But you know, YouTube has its unlimited option, sorry, unlisted option, where unless people know the exact URL, they're never going to find it, and that's just free. So I would probably encourage you to always use services that are specifically meant to serve video instead of hosting it yourself.
Nilofer, do you have anything to add, or is that?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, no problem. All I see of Heather's question is and to turn off comments. I'm not sure what the previous part of the conjunction is. Is that to Patrick's? I don't think I answered Patrick's question yet, or did I? Oh, I talked about plugins, but I was going to mention a few plugins for forms. One thing you can do is you can always add a button that says call, and then you can make the link a phone number. I've done that enough. I feel like any site I have open right now, it's going to have an example of that. This is with the old editor. Oh, actually, here, this will have it. Do I not? Oh, am I not logged in? I'll show you a quick example of what I mean by that, Patrick. So if you're on the front end, oh no, this is still showing the phone number. Never mind, not a good example. But here I can show you what I mean. If you're on this phone number, you can see that the link. You can see what I've done there right at the bottom. I've done TEL for telephone, colon, and then the phone number. Then if somebody clicks on that, it's going to, whatever system you're on, whether it's a laptop or a phone, it's going to automatically call that number. But you don't have to necessarily show that number. You can just change the text to, like, you know, to say like call us. I'm accidentally doing things here. And it'll still call that number because that number is in the link. So that's one way to kind of like hide your phone number. But if there's bots that are kind of scanning your sites looking for the phone number, they're still going to find it. And then I would go back to that whole option of using a form plugin and that sort of thing, or using a temporary phone number that you can update easily, like an internet phone number. Oh yeah, you can turn off comments on unlisted YouTube videos, Heather was saying. Yeah, that's a good, yeah, exactly. So yeah, then if you update this, it's just going to show the phone, the call us, but there's the telephone number. But yeah, I was going to mention a couple plugins to Patrick. One that I've used extensively is Gravity Forms. It does a lot of different things. So it's a fairly robust plugin that might be more complicated than you really need. Some other Jetpack I mentioned, which Automatic makes, which I know I said use plugins mostly that do one thing. The whole idea of Jetpack is to kind of give you a whole bunch of plugins, so it's a little different than what I was suggesting initially, but it's a well-supported one. They are all kind of those first steps kind of things you need. So they help you serve images quicker. You can get alerts if your site ever goes down. You can do brute force protection so that if people are spamming, trying to get into your site, they'll automatically blacklist them. You can make it, this is where the site accelerator is, that'll speed up image load times and static file load times. And all of that's for free. And it comes with a simple form plugin as well. So if if you, again, I'm going to through the front end because it's always, I find it simpler. If you go and edit the posts here, you'll see this is the form plugin, and you can just add new blocks. You can add new fields, and there's different kind of fields you can add to the form. And that way you're going to bypass the whole people seeing your phone number completely, and the system behind the scenes is going to email you. So then you shouldn't have to worry about being spammed and so on.
All right, I think there's no more questions.
I'm just going earlier on the webinar chat just to answer Julia. Can you have a host build your site? Hosts typically don't build sites. They might have some templates you can use, but anybody who builds your site using WordPress should be showing you how to change everything. And that's, again, one of the difference between kind of getting your site made well and not, is that you can, if you get it made well, they should be training you, and almost everything should be editable. You should be able to change the logo, the thing in the footers, every part of the posts and pages. You can change the background colors to things with the new editor. Like you can see here, the background to this, could be changed if you wanted. Right now, the overlay is this kind of beige, but I mean, this doesn't look better with but I mean, that's kind of cool, the black there. You can change these things, and you should be able to change it, because that's the benefit of WordPress. And if you don't have that ability when somebody builds you a site on WordPress, rather they didn't show you how to do it, and they did build it right, or they didn't build it right, and didn't really do things the WordPress way. Betty also said, make sure they train you how to update pages and add posts. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, if you guys ever are looking for a developer or a company, we have something that we're just rolling out now, where it's like a much cheaper startup fee in order to get going, where it's like, this is just in beta right now, so we're only taking on a few people, but where it's like $850 to kind of get your site initially rolled out using a really flexible theme that we've hand-coded everything. And then it's $89 a month after that. And then you'll constantly have updates, and when you need new features, we'll add that and build that in for everybody to benefit from. And that kind of keeps the cost low, instead of paying $1,000 for something that you might have to update every few years anyways. It actually ends up cheaper. Yeah, I really like helping people. So I mean, if any of you guys want to even talk about a project, or you just have questions, that's my contact information. Please don't sell it to bots and spammers, but feel free to give me a call about anything. And I love helping people with WordPress, as well as I lead a WordPress meetup in town. And there's lots of people there that like helping people as well.
Awesome, thanks, Ryan. Heather's, I see still a couple questions there.
Yeah, for sure. Nilfer, if I do not have a store, is a shared hosting package sufficient, or do you recommend VPS? Also, do I need, I would, because WordPress inherently has a login, and the way Chrome is, if you have a site that doesn't have SSL, which refers to encryption, it will give a warning. So for instance, you can see this on my development site, like these aren't servers. Chrome actually tells visitors to your site is not secure if it's not using encryption. Encryption refers to having an SSL certificate, which it's the difference when your site, instead of saying HTTP, it says HTTPS. And if you have a proper certificate and it's encrypted, you'll get this nice little lock here that says connection is secure. Not only is it better in terms of being more secure for anybody, including your login and people trying to hack your site, but also in terms of performance. Because HTTP, which you kind of probably heard that in URLs and so on, is the name of the protocol that the internet runs on. It's ancient. And several years ago, they're like, we need to come up with a new version of HTTP that really takes advantage of the way networks are nowadays. And so they cleverly called this HTTP 2. However, they were caring about the future of the internet. HTTP 2 is way faster. It allows you to download multiple things at the same time. However, because of the future of the internet, they're like, We want it to be secure. So we're going to only allow this protocol to be used if you have encryption. And so not only is encryption safer, it makes your site faster as long as the server has up-to-date software, which might be a concern with shared hosting. But the good news is SSL certificates should never be an upsell. They should always be free. And if your host isn't including a free option, they should be, because they're not paying for it. Unless it's a certain type of certificate. But we haven't met yet, Deborah, the Winnipeg meetup, but we are planning on meeting this Wednesday for like a Zoom kind of meeting. And typically what we do is we have a brief talk for about like 10, 15 minutes, and then we break into groups, but we're going to be digital. But fortunately, Zoom kind of has its groups. And so we're going to try this, see how many people come. You know, if only a handful of people come, we'll just stay in one group. But we break into groups so that any questions you might have about WordPress that you've brought with you, we ask people, you know, what they're thinking about, or what, you know, any questions they have. We kind of jot it all down, and then we break into groups around those questions so that everybody in a group, there's at least one person with a question and somebody with the answer. And so, and just because WordPress is so big, and it has like a huge like plethora of people that are kind of drawn to it, whether it be like people who are just wanting to make their first site, people whose job requires them to know it, people who are like kind of professional implementers, where they're like designers and marketers, but they're not really coders, but they're using it on a regular basis. And then, you know, on the far side of the spectrum, you have developers, but there's no majority in that meetup of any one subset. So definitely don't feel, you know, insecure, or can't tell somebody not to feel insecure. You don't need to feel insecure. Like there's going to be somebody who's coming to the meetup with the exact same experience, you know, level of experience you have. And it's never just like all professionals or anything like that. So yeah, we're going to try this Wednesday. And our meetup group is most active on the Facebook group, which is WordPress Winnipeg on Facebook. So feel free to join that. And any of the sites showed today were built by Interplay as well, if you're wondering why I'm logging in and doing things. Sorry, Rachel, your arm's up.
That's okay. Yeah, I was stretching.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I thought you were saying, my
Yeah.
turn. Stop talking, Ryan.
No,
Yeah.
no. There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, sure.
What is it? Well, Kelly wants to know how to just get started. And then Heather's looking for a social media feed plugin.
Yes. I usually build them into the themes I build, but I'm trying to think. Now, social media plugin is interesting because you just want to list your social media accounts, or are you wanting people to be able to share your posts to social media? As far as I can answer both, because both are things people would be interested in. Jetpack actually includes a sharing plugin, so that, and I mentioned before how it does a few different things. To see the tweets on the site if possible. This is one of these things where like I totally understand why people would want to do that. Like you can come to your site and they can see that you're active on Twitter. However, I mean, I would just encourage to let people know you're active, and just to kind of like a secondary call to action to say, hey, go to our Twitter account. Because embedding, essentially anytime you're loading the page, then you're loading all of Twitter every single time something comes to your page. And it's impossible to make that site really load fast at that point. But if you want it, I'm trying to think of, here's a really old site that I don't know. There was one. I have to go to an old site to find one because I probably discourage people from doing it on any newer project. But I still kind of understand this. So I'm not trying to tell you to not do it ever. But Yeah, this is local development as far as these outdated plugins. Just one second. Oh, that was a Facebook page feed widget. You know, maybe it was MPSG. Let me see. The other Twitter? Yeah, I did use one. Here it is. And I can tell you the name of that plugin. And it's worked. The site's, I think, 5 years old or so on. Might as well update it while I'm here. Custom Twitter feeds by Smashballoon is a plugin I have successfully used. I added an O to balloon. It's not Balloono. It's just balloon.
There was also a question about the encryption certificate. How do you get encryption certificate?
You host your site with me and I just take care of it. Every host is different. Every host is different, and you have to, again, I feel like it's like one of those things that they should have made fairly easy, because it's particularly with hosts, because the new HTTP protocol is faster, it's in their best interest for every site to use it, because then it's using less server resources. So, you know, here's, just to give you an example of the sort of documentation there should be, you know, in the chat, I'll just put this link to Bluehost's one, if you want to do it yourself. It looks like there is availability for free SSL certificates with Bluehost, yeah.
All right.
Sorry, I'm loudly drinking water. Somebody sing while I do this.
And so if somebody were to just, you know, they've never made a site, what would you say? First step?
This. Just make sure you have a clear purpose of what you're going to do, because it's really easy for the project to spin out of control because of all the things WordPress can do. And so you really want to be focused on achieving what it is you're doing. First thing, yeah, is really to, I mean, this is kind of what a marketing team would do in this circumstance. But that's important. The message, the whole medium and the whole platform's goal is to support the message. It's not a message in and of itself. That messaging and that content still has to somewhat come from you. If you're really uncomfortable creating the verbiage and so on, then yeah, work with a communications or marketing company to help you develop that. But if you don't have the budget, you have to, you know, that's really you have to start with what you're doing and knowing exactly what that is. And sometimes that puts too much of a burden on people. Again, it's a moving target. It doesn't have to be the answer of all your website or your business ever has to be. It's just like, choose to do one thing at first. Maybe it's just to show what it is that you're making, and with contact information. Don't stray from those two things at all. Just do those two things. Maybe if it is to build relationships with people, then yeah, make sure that your social media platforms or wherever you're interacting with people is also, you know, really front and center. And some people like that who have public personas, even though they have full-time, you know, are running full-time businesses. If you go to their sites, they'll say, connect with me on X platform. And that's a way of kind of managing the way people and communication is coming in.
Awesome. Kelly was just saying more about how, like, learning how WordPress works. Just dive in, or
Where's that question? I'm seeing multiple questions.
oh, sorry, it's in the chat. So, like, how to start, like, actually building your website.
Oh, the chat. Sorry.
Chat.
I mean, actually, like the mechanics as far as like from a database and code perspective, Kelly?
I think she just means like, or Kelly, they mean just making a practice site. Yeah.
There's a few different ways of going about it. You can just like, you can create, it sounds so intimidating, and it is a little, but there's some programs that do a lot of the hard lifting for you. You can create a development site on your own computer. So it's not on the internet at all. It's just a program that runs on your computer. It's like a little server, and you can install WordPress that way. Some of the most common first steps for people doing that are using something called MAMP or WAMP. And MAMP and WAMP, aside from being the best sounding acronyms in the world, just stands for like Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, which are kind of the code things you need on a server to run it. There's some simpler, here, let me, Flywheel is a specific local development platform that, oh no, that's their host. This is a WordPress specific host, but I'm trying to think of something by Flywheel. What is it? Local, I think. Local by Flywheel, which refers to the idea that it's local development. Here we go. If this is probably one of the easier ways that you can start developing. It's free. It should do most of the hard work as far as getting you going on WordPress locally. The other thing you can do is just create a live site on like Bluehost or any other host and just tinker. Nobody's going to find it unless you tell people about it, or unless you're creating such great content that you're ranking #1 on Google for everything. But at that point, your site should be live anyways if you're doing that well. But nobody will find it until you share it if you just want to get started practicing. But this in particular is one of it's a nicer UI to use than trying to figure out WAMP and that sort of thing.
Will you be sharing your slides with everyone, with me, so I can share them with everyone?
Maybe. I definitely will. I definitely will. Sorry. Yeah, no, I'd love to. I might double check. I'll go over them a little bit. I know I didn't go over my research slide, and it was my favorite title.
Oh,
but anyway.
the second slide you had is kind of a good like checklist of what you need to do, get in place. And
yeah, and the thing is why it's so good spending time on this is you'll always spend time on this. Like as soon as you're thinking about marketing yourself or your business, you should be doing these things. It's not WordPress specific. It's not website even specific. It's really just general marketing knowledge.
I guess I'm at the third page.
Well, geez, I really like this one. Jargon #1?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
hopefully you took notes. I didn't write much on here. I thought somebody else asked a question somewhere. This is an open question. Nilfer, is it time for this question? Yes. If I need to build 2 to 3 sites, would you recommend using multi-site or single sites? 100% single sites. Multi-site is going to add a certain complexity. Nilfer, I don't know where exactly your experience is. So, I mean, if you've already been building kind of like custom WordPress sites or themes and you're really comfortable with it, then multi-site might be an option. But really, multi-site is a beautiful, powerful thing. But unless you're kind of, unless I think you're starting to scale a lot bigger, it doesn't really help, particularly, let's say even you were using the same theme for all 3 sites. Well, you would just, that theme, you can just have automatic updates on. And so from a management perspective, it's not really that much harder. And you can do automatic, again, going back to automatic updates, make sure you have automatic backups going as well. That would be the biggest concern in terms of that process goes. The time saved from only having to update one code base isn't necessarily that easier. I myself like learning things inside out, so there's times I've used multi-site when I didn't necessarily need to, but it's never really, unless you're starting to scale really large or really comfortable on the code side of things, it's not going to benefit, you know, the time reward ratio at all. Now, if you had like 30 sites, maybe that would be different. But no problem. Oh, there's oh no, that was just that comment. Never mind. I was just looking at the dismiss Q&A. I was hoping there'd be like heckling there that you had dismissed, but no heckles. I can't hear anything right now. Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I didn't unmute myself.
It's okay.
It's been a long day. I was just saying, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. There's so much knowledge, so much to know. And for sharing your contact information. I'll be sure to pass that on when I
Sure.
share the video. And yeah.
I mean, the only other thing I was going to say, and we talked about, and I didn't create a questionnaire or anything like that, but we talked about like a few different things that could be like another workshop. If you guys want to, like, whatever you think the next step might be, let Rachel know, and then we can like maybe work on doing a talk that does that, whatever that next step is. Maybe it's more of a tutorial sort of thing. Maybe it's working on like content and marketing side of things, whatever. But yeah, let her know. Or me, I mean, but I'll let her know.
Awesome. Oh, is there one more? No, that's just a thank you. All right.
No problem.
Okay, everyone, good luck building websites or
Hiring
hire a developer.
developers.
Okay. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Bye.